Hello everyone, Annabelle here. This is episode 5 of a little mini series of podcasts that I'm doing for Thyroid Awareness Month. We have been talking really kind of about thyroid basics, and this video is all about triggers and treatments. I realized that I probably should have covered triggers earlier than this, so this is going to be triggers and treatments. That is like what triggers a thyroid condition, like what are the common things that lead you to getting a thyroid condition. And then, of course, treatment. How do you actually treat a thyroid condition or the different thyroid conditions? What are the options? And both medical and lifestyle I'm going to dive into. And again, remember these videos, they're just short and sweet. There's a lot to unpack in each of these topics. And so if you're looking for more detail, you might want to grab a copy of my book, Let's Talk Thyroid, which goes over all these basics that I'm covering in these videos and also in a lot of depth, how to actually live what I call a thyroid-friendly lifestyle. You can grab a copy of that via my website, letstalkthyroid.com or Amazon. So triggers. So when we talk about triggers, it's kind of like what are the root causes? What's the underlying kind of reason why you might develop a thyroid disease? And there's lots of different things, and there's no magic kind of one thing. Usually people have their own little unique collection of maybe predispositions and then a specific trigger. So, and it's actually difficult to actually test for these things and know for sure. So some of it is about being able to look back and connect the dots. But it is really helpful to be able to do that, because if you can work out what are the things that may have triggered or caused or contributed to your thyroid condition, then they're things that you can learn how to manage, reduce, remove, change so that it doesn't keep being triggered. So it is really important to be able to look back and think, yeah, these are the sorts of things that I think might have contributed towards me having a thyroid condition. I am running from the 1st of June a Write Your Thyroid Story, little 5-day challenge. So if trying to connect the dots and doing it in a purposeful way sounds appealing to you, then keep an eye out for that. But here are some common triggers, and we're talking here specifically about autoimmune disease. I mean, when we're talking about thyroid conditions, the vast majority are autoimmune, Hashimoto's or Graves', so that's what I'm going to cover here. So you do need to have a genetic predisposition. Yes, so this is where thyroid conditions often do run in families, particularly down sort of mother lines, it seems. More women get thyroid conditions. That's probably why it seems like that. So if your mum or sister or aunt or cousin has a thyroid condition or daughter, then, be aware that you may have a genetic predisposition. Significant changes in hormones are common trigger periods. So things like puberty, I think that's what it was for me. Pregnancy, very common trigger for thyroid conditions, and perimenopause, menopause. Those key hormonal shifts are common times when people are diagnosed. So that's kind of a common trigger. There are definitely lifestyle factors that contribute towards thyroid disease, so things like being sedentary, but also the flip side to that, like over-exercising, overtraining, constantly eating not enough calories and over-exercising. That is a common story. Smoking, alcohol, they can contribute, as can unhealthy relationships, because actually stress is a really significant contributor to autoimmune thyroid conditions. So whether that's chronic stress, like being in a long-term unhealthy relationship, whether it's a peak, an acute stress like a separation, a death of a loved one, a loss of a job, a move, like you move house or countries or schools or jobs, they can be stressful events that can trigger so that's stress and trauma. There can be food triggers. So typically dietary proteins are common triggers. So things like gluten, casein, more so than the lactose in dairy. It's the casein usually, eggs, lectins. So there's a big conversation all in and of itself. But if you are constantly eating those foods that can cross-react with thyroid tissue and contribute to leaky gut, that can be a recipe for a thyroid disease. Within that too, a pro-inflammatory diet, so eating a lot of processed food, high inflammatory foods, a lot of sugars, alcohol, processed food, artificial colors, flavors, toxins, they're contributing factors. Iodine is a vexed issue within the thyroid circles. So too little iodine can cause problems, but so can too much. So it is definitely a Goldilocks thing. Exposure to toxic chemicals is another. Exposure to toxic chemicals like plastics or BPAs, or perhaps you've lived on a farm and grown up around fertilizers and pesticides. I've spoken to people in the beauty industry like hairdressers and beauticians that feel like their kind of exposure to a lot of toxic chemicals has contributed to their thyroid condition. Definitely pathogens and infections. So like there's an infection connection. So EBV, Epstein-Barr virus is a common infection connection, but even things like hepatitis C, Candida, H. pylori, and some nutritional deficiencies. So like not enough vitamin D, not enough zinc, not enough selenium. They can contribute to kind of creating this perfect storm. So usually people will have a bit of a collection of those triggers, and that is and then like one thing might happen, and then your perfect storm has been created. So being aware of those different things can help you, as I said before, perhaps avoid them in the future or address some of those issues. So that is the triggers. Now, sort of separate to that, but in this triggers and treatments episode, I want to talk about treatment. Because there are different ways of treating thyroid conditions. And again, this is a massive topic. This is just going to be a brief overview. So when we're talking about an underactive thyroid, if your body is not producing enough thyroid hormone, then you may well need medication to replace that thyroid hormone that your body is not producing. And there are a number of different styles of thyroid hormone medications. But I just want to say from the outset, taking medication is not failure. Taking medication isn't something with the thyroid health thing that if you need it, you need it. You actually need thyroid hormone, and if your body can't produce it, you actually do need to take thyroid medication. It's not one of those optional extra medications if you need it. So the most common form of medication is synthetic T4, which around the world is called different things. It's levothyroxine, it's in Australia Utroxig and Oroxin. But essentially it's synthetic T4, which your body then needs to be able to convert into T3. That's the most common form of medication, but there are others. Beyond that, you may have difficulty getting other forms of medication from your doctor if they don't know a lot about how to well manage a thyroid condition. So just be aware of that, but also be aware there are other options. So if the T4 medication is not working for you, you might want to explore T3 medication, compounded T3, a compounded T4, T3, slow release T3, natural desiccated thyroid, which is usually a pig thyroid, like it's most similar to a human thyroid hormones. So they're the most common of your thyroid treatments. When we're talking about Graves' disease, that is quite a different story when it comes to medication. Treatment for Graves' disease, you've got that sort of anti-thyroid medication. Sometimes they remove the thyroid altogether. And then if that's the case, then you'll need to go on thyroid replacement medication. So the whole medication thing is quite complex when it comes, particularly to Graves, actually. There's when you're talking about sort of removing part of the thyroid or really kind of squashing thyroid hormone production, some of that medication you can't be on for long periods of time. So it's something you definitely need to get good medical advice about. I have done a couple of episodes where I've talked to people with Graves' disease and how they've managed it, or thyroid practitioners about Graves' disease. So just go looking for them on the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. There are a couple of really great ones that do dive into the medication aspect. Aside from medication, and I'm going to come to this when we're in a later episode where I'm talking about living with a thyroid condition, but just know that beyond medication, there's a lot of diet and lifestyle changes that you can make that actually are, I would consider part of thyroid health treatment and management. So making some dietary changes, looking at stress, mindset, how you unwind, reducing your toxic load, doing thyroid-friendly exercise. There's a whole range of different diet and lifestyle components that do go into an overall thyroid treatment plan alongside medication. So like I said before, it's not either or. It can be both. And if you need medication, take medication as advised by your doctor. But know that there's plenty of other things you can do as well as take the medication. And really the medication is dealing with, this is a case whether it's Graves or Hashey's, is the medication is dealing with the thyroid hormone function. The diet and lifestyle in a broad sense is dealing with the autoimmune component. It's about reducing inflammation, reducing stress, reducing that inflammatory load, reducing that immune response, that cell protection. It's a protective response of the body, and that's where the autoimmune management tends to be in the diet and lifestyle elements. So there you go, there you have it. That is the triggers and treatments for thyroid disease. Next up in the next episode, which I think we're up to maybe 6 after this, is I'm going to dive more into living with a thyroid disorder and all the different things that you can do to live well with a thyroid condition. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button or a bell or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.